If a landowner, as a landowner, if a pipeline company representative comes to your door and asks you if they can go onto your property, you have the right to refuse them entry onto your property, unless they produce a document showing that they have eminent domain authority. And usually that happens after a court proceeding, and you'll be well aware of what is going on at that time. My talk today is really going to focus on the way in which landowners or the general public can get involved in the permitting and authorization process for natural gas pipelines. There are essentially three different types of pipeline projects that are prevalent in the Delaware River Basin area. One are distribution lines, which are the very small gas pipelines that provide gas to your homes. Another type of gas pipeline are your gathering pipelines, and these pipelines connect the actual wells, natural gas well pads themselves, to other pipeline networks. And the third type, and which will be what we're going to discuss most here today, are transmission pipelines, and more specifically interstate transmission pipelines. And these are the larger 20-inch to 36-inch pipelines that we're seeing a lot of activity with in recent years. In the Delaware River Basin alone, there have been somewhere between 12 and 15 proposed or existing natural gas pipelines since 2011. Essentially, there are four ways in which the general public can get involved with essentially engaging in the permitting process and making their voice heard. There are four primary permits that a pipeline company is going to need to ascertain in order to move forward with their project. The first one, and the one that potentially most people are familiar with, is the FERC Certificate of Convenience and Public Necessity, and FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. A pipeline project cannot move forward without this permit. Usually the way in which the process works is a project applicant will come to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and enter what is called a pre-filing process. At that time, the project applicant will provide the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission with 13 different resource reports. Each of these resource reports details a different area, a different type of impact that the pipeline may have on the environment, or there's also resource reports for safety issues. At this time, during the pre-filing process, anybody can submit comments to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So if you are aware of a pipeline project in your area and you would like to make a comment on it and it's in the pre-filing process, it is completely acceptable for you to make comments at that time. And those comments will be considered by the Commission in its review of the project. Eventually, the project applicant will have to leave the pre-filing process and initiate what is called their filing process for the FERC certificate itself. At that time, as a landowner, what you will need to do to stay engaged is become what is called an intervener. And there are instructions on the FERC website for ways in which you can submit that filing to the FERC docket. On the FERC website, all this information from the pre-filing stage up through the certificate stage will all be publicly available online on the FERC website, as long as you know the docket number for the project. So at that time, after the project applicant submits a certificate application and you have submitted a document saying that you are an interested party and you would like to be an intervener, you can then submit comments at the certificate stage. And this is important because in order to preserve your rights to eventually appeal any certificate that is authorized by the Commission, you need to be an intervener, and you need to have submitted comments on the record. And the most important stage for submitting comments, while you can submit them through the entire process, the most important stage to submit them is after FERC has issued their environmental review document, and that may come in the form of an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. After one of those two documents is issued, if you're an intervener, you can review that document. It's publicly available, and then you can submit your own comments with detailing what concerns you may have with the project or the right-of-way or the resources that are being impacted. At that time, you have 30 days to comment, after which then the commission reviews all the different comments and eventually comes out with issues a decisional document. And usually at that point, FERC approves the project. And if they do so, you, as an intervener, you can request what is called a rehearing. And you submit that rehearing request to the commission, arguing or stating that you believe that the commission overlooked an aspect of one of your comments. At that time, it is the commission's practice to issue a tolling order, which extends the amount of time they have to respond to your rehearing request. At which time, after the commission eventually does respond to your rehearing request, which may take anywhere from 1 month to 6 months, at that time and only at that time may you submit an appeal to Federal Circuit Court and actually take the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to court, arguing that their decision was arbitrary and capricious. So that is one way that you can get involved on one of the permits. A second permit that is necessary for a project to move forward is what is called a Clean Water Act 401 certification. And usually this document is issued, or usually this permit is issued by either the State Department of Environmental Protection, whether that's the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, New Jersey, New York, or Delaware. Essentially, these state departments have been provided delegated authority from the EPA to issue this federal permit. And as an example, in Pennsylvania, this permit is embodied in the Chapter 105 Water Obstruction and Encroachment Permit. If you're a landowner and again, you're concerned that there's a pipeline project in your area, that this pipeline project will need to be noticed in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. So if you review the Pennsylvania Bulletin, which comes out every Friday online, you can look and see if a different pipeline operator has proposed a project for your area. If you find one there, you'll also find the docket number and the specific permit number. And at that time, you can request, you can do a file review request or a right to know, or I'm sorry, a more formal right to know request to gain access to the permit application, so that you can review that application, review that material, and comment on it. Unlike FERC, PAYDEP doesn't have an online depository where all of this information is kept and is easily accessible. Instead, like I said, you need to file a right to know request to gain access to that information so that you can then submit comments. Once the application is noticed in the Pennsylvania Bulletin, you would have 30 days to submit comments. Although it is our experience that, at least in Pennsylvania, the project managers for these pipeline projects are willing to accept comments well beyond the 30 days that they are statutorily required to accept comments and consider comments. A lot of times this is because the pipeline project will change significantly and in different ways, such that different resources are impacted, and therefore instead of renoticing the project, they just PAYDEP just continues to take comments throughout the process. Again, similar to the FERC permit, in order to challenge the permit in federal court, as a commenter, you would need to wait until PAYDEP has actually issued the final permit. you have to exhaust, you have to wait until a final decision is made and exhaust your administrative remedies before you can get into court. Unlike the FERC process, you do not necessarily need to file a formal intervention notice. With Pennsylvania, you can just submit comments. And for standing purposes, once you file in court, at that time you can establish standing and harm and those type of things. A third permit that is required is issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and is called a Clean Water Act Section 404 Dredge and Fill Permit. Again, a project cannot move forward without this permit. And again, this permit would be noticed in the Federal Register. And so you would have notice as long as you reviewed the Federal Register and were generally aware that a project was happening in your area. For this particular type of permit, the Corps needs to make an independent conclusion about whether the project is contrary to the public interest, and that the cost of the projects, and whether or not the cost of the projects outweigh the benefits. So this is an opportunity to comment and say that the project is indeed contrary to the public interest for reasons X, Y, and Z. Similar to the PAYDEP permit, the actual permit itself is not available online. So again, you would have to file a right to know request or file a file review request with the Army Corps of Engineers, and that way you can get access to the information, to the application, so that you can make substantive comments. The Corps must also provide an alternatives analysis, and this is a slightly separate analysis as to what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does. The Corps needs to make find that there are no practicable alternatives that are less environmentally damaging, which is a slightly different standard than what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has to do. So that is an opportunity also to comment on that specific issue. The last permit that is generally required in order for a project to move forward is one that is issued by the Delaware River Basin Commission. So if a natural gas pipeline project either enters into or encroaches upon an area that is considered a comprehensive plan area, the DRBC may then exercise its jurisdiction and require the pipeline applicant to initiate a docket with the Delaware River Basin Commission. At that time, the pipeline applicant can submit information, and similar to the other permits and authorizations that are needed, a interested party, anybody, a landowner, can submit a right to know request or a file review request, and you can gain access to that application material and again comment substantively on that project. The DRBC also has authority, in addition to when projects cross through comprehensive plan areas. They also have jurisdiction where the project involves a significant disturbance to ground cover affecting water resources. And while the DRBC has yet to exercise jurisdiction specific to that triggering mechanism, that is a triggering mechanism and an opportunity for comment if you believe that the pipeline project is big enough and large enough that it may result in a significant disturbance of ground cover that might affect either a stream or a wetland. You have the opportunity to make that statement and ask the DRBC to take jurisdiction over that project pursuant to that authority. The DRBC has quarterly meetings, and as a landowner or a public, or anybody interested in the project itself, you can attend those quarterly meetings and make statements and get your comments on the record. We would advise to try to get your comments in earlier than the quarterly meetings, as the procedure at the DRBC dictates that you would submit your comments and the next day the commission votes. It's not a whole lot of time for the commission to consider substantively what you're saying. So therefore, we would recommend that you would send your comments in as early as possible, and encourage the DRBC to make a determination as to whether or not the pipeline project, whether its impacts and harms associated with the pipeline project are consistent with the terms and conditions of the compact itself. So those are the 4 different primary permits that are required in order for a pipeline project to move forward, and they are all each provide great opportunities for either the landowner or the public in general to get involved and make a difference. Just because you have someone come to your door and tell you that a pipeline they want to put a pipeline in your backyard, that by no means is a fait accompli that it's going to happen. We have seen many times in the past where pipelines have been either stopped or they have been mitigated substantially through the involvement of concerned citizens. And these 3 different permits and authorizations are potential avenues for people to express their concerns, get their concerns heard, and have these different regulating agencies respond to them in such a way that either the pipeline is stopped wholesale or it's changed or modified. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and we'll be happy to help you in the best way that we can.